This is a 2013 Rolls-Royce Phantom Drophead Coupe. And I mean, just look at it. This is a car that is designed to remind you that no matter how successful you think you are, no matter how well you think your life is going, there are people out there whose lives are much, much better. Today, for a little while, I'm going to be one of those people. I borrowed this 2013 Phantom Drophead Coupe from CNC Motors here in Southern California, which is like the exotic car dealer in this area. They have an unending inventory of crazy, insane, amazing exotic cars. You can check out some of their inventory if you click the links below. It is truly magnificent. Now, CNC sent me a note and they said, hey, you can pick out some cars to do a review on. And I thought about it for a long time, and then I decided I wanted something where I could look down on the peasants. So I chose this. Here's a little background. The Rolls-Royce Phantom from this generation came out for the 2004 model year, and originally it was just a sedan. The convertible version came out for the 2008 model year, and Rolls-Royce referred to it as the Phantom Drophead Coupe. Strangely enough, more on that in a minute. Now, Rolls-Royce recently redesigned the Phantom with an all-new model, but the new Phantom Convertible isn't available yet. And so, for now, this is the most opulent, luxurious convertible you can buy. As for the details, this car uses a 6.75-liter V12 with 450 horsepower and about 530 pound-feet of torque. Now, back when this car was new 5 years ago, the base price for a Phantom Drophead Coupe started at $470,000. The sticker price on this one with options was just a shade over $500,000. Now, today, 5 years later, CNC has this one listed for around $270,000, meaning that it's half price. But just because it's an amazing bargain compared to what it originally cost doesn't mean it's any less amazing than it was back in 2013. So today I'm going to show you all of that amazing, and I'm going to show you the many quirks and features of the Rolls-Royce Phantom Drophead Coupe. And then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a DougScore. And for more of my thoughts on the Drophead Coupe, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also rounded up a list of the cheapest used Rolls-Royce models currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. Now, I'm going to start with a discussion of the Phantom Drophead's behemoth size. This right here is a Mercedes-Benz C-Class, which is a normal, rational automobile that a regular person might buy. And this next to it is the Phantom, and you can see just how much more massive the Phantom is, especially in terms of height. The belt line is so much higher in the Phantom that it almost seems like an SUV compared to the C-Class. It's absolutely huge. The Phantom, you know, is a big car, but you don't really know how big it is until you see it in context next to a regular vehicle on the road. But it isn't just this car's high belt line and overall height that make it such an imposing vehicle on the road. It's also the length. Excuse me while I take a walk to the rear of the Phantom Drophead. This car is 221 inches long, or roughly 5.6 meters for all you metric people. Put another way, it's 2 feet longer than a Range Rover. Now, 220 inches may not seem like all that long. It's the length of a full-size pickup, or a little longer than a Chevy Suburban, but then you remember that this car has 2 doors. It's 2 feet longer than a Range Rover for a 2-door car. It's just ridiculous. Now, on the subject of this car's massive presence, I want to talk about the wheels. Now, I make a point to never review cars with aftermarket wheels. I think the factory wheels sort of contribute to the overall factory appearance of all the cars that I review, except this one. This car is so gigantic and it has so much presence that I think aftermarket 24-inch wheels just perfectly fit the character of this car. And yes, that's what these are, 24s. Why would you have anything less on your Phantom Drophead? Next up, moving on to some other quirks of the Phantom Drophead, one of my favorite ones is the hood. This particular car has the stainless steel option, and so you have the hood finished in this beautiful stainless steel. Same goes for the front grille and, unusually, for the A-pillar and the area around the windshield. It's all this gorgeous brushed stainless steel. Some people don't like the look of this, but personally I do. I think it very much sets this car apart from regular luxury cars that have simple paint on the hood. Next up, moving on to the headlights. There's nothing particularly quirky about the headlights, although they are split in half. One half is the regular headlights, the other is the high beams. Maybe the most interesting thing about the headlights is that emblazoned in the headlight cover it says RR, the Rolls-Royce logo, something you would never notice unless you notice. And next up we move on to the doors. Now there are a couple of interesting items about the doors. One is simply the way you open them with this beautiful silver handle that also kind of fits into this trim piece on the side of the car. But as you can see, this handle is in the front of the door, which is rather weird, and that brings us to our next door-related quirk, namely that they're rear hinged. So you open them like that and then you simply walk in to your Phantom drophead a lot easier than a normal door. But there's a problem. Now the door is really far away and so it's hard to close. Fortunately, Rolls-Royce makes it easy. There is a button you push next to the A-pillar to the left of the steering wheel. You press it and then the door automatically closes. So when you climb into your Phantom drophead, you don't have to bother yourself with plebeian tasks like closing your own door. And by the way, that door trick doesn't only work on the driver's side of the car. Your passenger gets out and they're simply too wealthy to close their own door. No problem, there is a second door button in the same place the first one. Press it, and the passenger door closes as well. Next we move on to the trunk of the Phantom Drophead Coupe, but before we do, I want to talk about the key. I like this key because it's weird and cryptic. There are 3 main buttons on it. The one on the top is an arrow pointing up. That unlocks the doors. The middle button is the RR Rolls-Royce logo that locks the doors, and then the third and final button is just a square that opens the trunk. Kind of gotta know the code in order to figure out this key. More interesting than the key is the trunk. So I press the square button on the key fob and the trunk pops open. And it's kind of a weird thing. It only pops open here, this part. Everything else down here stays put, which is a little odd until you realize that it's a split trunk. You press a little button on the top of this part of the trunk and then this bit comes down just like a split tailgate in a Range Rover. I've never seen another car with a split trunk, certainly not a modern car, but this vehicle has it. And as you can see, the lower tailgate part, when it's folded down, is completely carpeted, so it could be a nice place to sit and enjoy a picnic. Now, the trunk of the Phantom Drophead Coupe is an excellent place to illustrate just how much better this vehicle is than your car. There are several excellent examples, and I'm going to start with the interior trunk release. Now, in your car, you have an emergency inside trunk release in case you try to kidnap someone. They can pull a little lever and get out. Usually it's this cheap little plastic latch and it's nothing. In this car, it is plastic, but it is rimmed in chrome because even the emergency inside trunk release must have this aluminum lining around it to look beautiful. Next up, in your car, you may have a warning triangle if you break down and a first aid kit. And in your car, it probably is hidden in some compartment that's labeled with a little sticker. Not in this car. Instead, in this car, it's in a compartment that has a leather piece on it, and the symbols for the first aid kit and the warning triangle are embroidered with this beautiful stitching, because even the sign showing you where that stuff is has to be of the highest quality. So anyway, then you go to open up the little compartment where the warning triangle and the first aid kit are. Of course, it is carpeted, and the little loop you pull to open it is leather and stitched. You open it up, and you're greeted by a couple of other items that are better than in your car. For instance, the first aid kit is not in some crappy little plastic pouch. Instead, it's in this beautiful cloth pouch that is once again embroidered with the RR logo and the words first aid kit. You also have a toolkit back here with a couple of rather interesting tools. There is a wrench that says on it Rolls-Royce, so you know that you have a legit Rolls-Royce wrench, not that crap you'd get in a normal car. Now, another interesting item in the trunk is the other side of the first aid kit and toolkit area. You can see there is another storage compartment. You open up this one and you will discover just extra storage. You can just put stuff in there if you have stuff that you want to hide and keep out of the way from your regular trunk storage. Next up, moving under the hood, and you can see this car's famous 6.75 liter V12. It's a very beautiful engine with Rolls-Royce printed above both cylinder banks. Very cool. But my favorite item under the hood is not the engine itself, but rather the little label that lets you know which oil to buy. Now, a lot of cars put a little label under the hood that tells you which oil they recommend. Usually, it's a little sticker you can peel off, but not in this car. In this car, it is a metal plaque, and it's fastened in place with 4 rivets. Even the little sticker in this car that recommends Castrol is more luxurious and upscale than in a normal car. Now, next up, I want to move inside the Phantom Drophead, but before I do, there are a couple of interesting items I want to cover in the door, one of which is the umbrella. Now, when you open the door like this and you climb out, there is a little spot in the front fender where there is an umbrella hidden. You push a little silver button and the umbrella is delivered to you. They're in storage right now, but you get the idea. You push the button, you take the umbrella, and then you can just immediately cover yourself from the rain the moment you get out of your Phantom Drophead, so you don't have to go root around for your umbrella. But that is not my favorite thing in the door panel. My favorite thing in the door panel is this little piece in the back of the armrest that says RR. What exactly is this? Well, you pull it out and it turns out that it's an ashtray for the rear passengers. The rear passengers have a little cigarette lighter on their armrest, and their ashtray is integrated in to the door. And so when they want to go and put out their cigar in the back seat, you just pull this little silver piece from the front door armrest, you do it, and then you can push it back in place and cover it. Obviously, there's also one over on the door on the passenger side so that both rear passengers can have access to an ashtray. Next up, moving on to the interior of the Phantom Drophead Coupe, where I start by showing you that you can put everything away. Here's what I mean by that. Right now you can see that showing in place are the controls for the infotainment system, the ashtray, and the infotainment screen itself, but none of those things have to be showing. If you don't want to see the pesky infotainment controls, you can just push them into the center console and they're gone. You don't want to see the ashtray? Push it into the center console and it's gone. And my personal favorite, the infotainment screen. If you don't want the screen there cluttering your dashboard, press this little button just to the right of the steering wheel, and then the screen folds away and it's replaced by an analog clock, just like the old school pre-screen world that probably most Phantom owners used to live in. But in addition to being able to fold stuff away and hide it and take it out of view, this car also gives you the opportunity to reveal a lot of things that are at first glance hidden. For example, the power seat controls are some of the strangest I've ever seen in any car. They're not little buttons on the side of the seat. Instead, you press this little silver button on the center console lid. It opens up, and you can see there's some form of power seat controls, and to adjust the seats, it's very odd. You press the area on the seat that you want to adjust, then it lights up in red, and then you move the seat using this little silver joystick thing in front. What this basically means is that you can't simply adjust the seat. You get in and the seat is too far forward, you can't just press the button and move it back. Instead, you have to open up the center console, highlight the area you want to press, then move the little joystick in order to move the seat. It's very strange. Stranger still is the fact that the heated seat controls are fixed in place on the side of the center console, meaning it's easier to just press the button to turn on the heated seat than to actually move the seat. That requires a lot more effort. One interesting item with the seat controls is the headrest. You can see the headrest is this beautiful single post headrest with the RR logo embroidered in it. In order to move the headrest, you highlight the backrest of the seat and then you move the joystick up or down, and you can see that the headrest moves up or down corresponding with what you do, and it looks very nice when it does that. Now, speaking of opening stuff up to reveal hidden things, if you were watching before, you noticed there are 2 silver buttons on the center console. The rear silver button opens up the actual center console itself, which is a storage area, but it also has a USB port and a few other things, but that's mostly what it's for. Now, another interesting hidden item in this car is the glove box. That's hidden in a lot of cars, but in this one, it's especially unusual, in part because opening the glove box is weird. There's not just a latch you pull. Instead, you press this little silver key lock thing to the left of the glove box, and it opens right up. And when the glove box is open, you will find that there are a few hidden controls in there that you wouldn't have known about otherwise. For example, you have the control that raises and lowers the Spirit of Ecstasy. That is the hood ornament on this car at the very front. If you press the little down arrow next to the Spirit of Ecstasy, it will lower into the grille so no one can steal your coveted Rolls-Royce hood ornament. When you want to raise it back up, just press the little arrow to the left, it goes up, and the Spirit of Ecstasy will again reveal herself automatically. Another hidden item in this vehicle is the other glove box. Like I mentioned, there's this little silver key lock that opens up the glove box. Well, to the left of that, there is another unlabeled silver circle. You press that, and it opens up the lower glove box. It's worth noting, though, the lower glove box doesn't really have that much storage. Instead, it's really just there as the place where they stick the 6-disc CD changer. You can get in there and adjust your CDs. And another interesting interior item where something hidden can be revealed, there's this little black panel in the middle. You push it, and then it sort of slowly reveals the plastic lid surrounded by chrome trim. When you peel back the lid, you will find a tiny little carpeted storage area. I'm not sure what you'd put there, but it's a nice little hidden piece, I guess, for your phone or something else that you don't want other people to access. Now, speaking of hidden items, it's worth noting that the button in the very middle of the entire dashboard is unlabeled. It's simply a silver circle. So what exactly does that do? Well, it's simple. It's just the volume control if you twist it, and if you push it, it turns the stereo on or off. Now, right above the volume control is one of my favorite features of this car, and that would be the 8 little preset switches. Now, the presets are not that unusual. You can preset them to radio controls or to do other functions in the vehicle. But the thing I like most about them is the fact that if you have the infotainment screen put away and you simply run your hand over the presets, not touch them, but just slide your hand over them, the infotainment screen senses that you're maybe feeling the presets, and it automatically opens up so you can tell what exactly each preset does. Again, you don't even have to touch the preset for this to happen. You just have to run your hands over it. The screen will reveal itself so that you can then see what your presets do. Next up, in terms of interesting controls in this vehicle, you have the controls at the top of the windshield next to the mirror. How about the fact that there are 2 separate buttons to turn on the dome lights? If you press the silver button, the dome lights turn on very gradually. If you press the middle black button, they turn on instantly. So you can choose how quickly you want your dome lights to come on in your Phantom Drophead. Now, next up, another interesting item in this car is the gear lever, which comes off the steering column like in an old Chevy pickup. It's obviously a lot nicer than that. You push it down for drive, you push it up for reverse, neutral is in the middle, and to access park, you push the end of the lever towards the steering column, and then you're in park. Speaking of weird decisions in the steering wheel area, it's worth noting that the horn is not in the center of the steering wheel like in most other cars. Instead, you can sound the horn by pressing these little black spokes in the upper right and upper left. Another strange item up here is in the gauge cluster. You can see it has a speedometer, a fuel gauge. It also has a tachometer, but it isn't quite a tachometer. Instead, it's a power reserve meter. It doesn't show how fast the engine is turning, but rather how much power you have in reserve. When you floor it, it goes all the way down to 0 since you're using all the power. And when you're just cruising along, it's always somewhere near 100 until you actually step on it. Another unusual item that only Rolls-Royces have is these odd climate controls that are so bizarre. Adjusting the temperature is the strangest thing. It's these weird sliders that you can sort of slide from blue to red depending on whether you want cold or hot. Everyone else has gone to numbered temperatures, but Rolls-Royce is still living in the days of a blue and red wheel. Also unusual are the dials that you can use to adjust the fan speed. It's not that unusual to see dials to adjust the fan speed, but the weird thing in this car is they're wrapped in leather. Even the fan speed adjuster dials in this car are leather wrapped for the ultimate in luxury. Now, next up we move on to the rear seats in the Phantom Drophead Coupe. And to access the rear seats, it's actually kind of interesting. You press this little silver button here on the side of the front seat, and then you pull on this little silver latch that pulls the front seat forward. There is absolutely no plastic involved in this process. But anyway, you climb in the back, and you will find that it's reasonably roomy back here, although not quite as roomy as you might expect considering this car's massive size. But once you're back here, you do discover a couple of interesting quirks and features. One interesting quirk of the rear seat is that there's a grab handle for the seat located right here, I guess, so that when you're getting in or getting out, you can just kind of pull on it and lift yourself up and get out easily. Another interesting quirk back here, below the grab handle, below the rear cigarette lighter that I showed you earlier, there is, strangely enough, a rear storage compartment back here that's actually quite large. I can't imagine most people would even find this, but it's back here for all the things that rear passengers want to store. Another interesting item in the back seat is the fact that even the rear passengers have their own climate zones. You can see the little red-blue slider, just like you have up front. The rear passengers can adjust for their desired temperature, even though very few people are probably ever going to be in the back seat of this car. And then there is the center armrest. It's not all that unusual to have a center armrest in the back seat, but I love the fact that in this car, when you start to put the center armrest down, it would leave a hole that isn't filled with leather. So in this car, they have sort of like an auxiliary piece of leather that comes in and closes that hole when the center armrest is down, just so nothing will have to be uncovered by leather in this beautiful leather interior. One other interesting item in the seats themselves, if you look on the headrests, you can see that they have RR printed on them, very beautiful, just like the front seats, but there's also something else printed on them. On the top of the headrest, you can see it says rollover protection system. This system has an explosive charge inside the headrest that is designed to explode when the car detects a rollover and stick out these huge roll bars that will keep the car from kind of crushing the occupants in the back. Convertibles are required to have this system, and this car does, and they're just sort of built in there, ready and waiting to spring into action in case this car rolls over. But none of those items are my favorite feature about the rear seats. My favorite feature is the fact that even though this car is completely open, the roof down, all the windows down, totally open air experience, if I want to, I can do this. Yes, that's right, the rear passengers have their own individual window, so I do not have to speak to you. And now, with all of those minor details out of the way, it is time to move on to the thing that you've been waiting for, and that would be the roof. And now that I've demonstrated the fact that this car is certainly indeed a convertible, I want to talk about one other weird quirk of this vehicle, and that would be its name. Rolls-Royce officially refers to this vehicle as the Phantom Drophead Coupe, even though it is in fact a convertible and not a coupe. And making matters even weirder, there was actually a Phantom Coupe with a fixed metal roof. And then you have the Drophead Coupe, which has a soft top. My theory here is that Rolls-Royce feels that the top, when it's in place, is insulated enough to make this car be a coupe by traditional parlance. You drive around, you hear nothing, it is like a coupe. But in Rolls-Royce terminology, drophead means convertible, and so this car gives you the best of both worlds. Coupe insulation, but drophead convertibleness. And so technically it is the Drophead Coupe, but it's a convertible. And so those are the many quirks and features of the 2013 Rolls-Royce Phantom Drophead Coupe convertible. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Phantom Drophead Coupe convertible. The first thing you notice when you get in this vehicle is just the incredible quietness and ease with which it all, I mean, the steering is so light and you don't have to do anything and you just feel refreshed simply getting in this car. As you accelerate, you hear basically nothing. You hear no wind noise, just the smallest bit of engine noise, no exhaust. It is large. You do get the sense that it's large. You're behind an E38 7 Series and you feel like you're in an SUV looking over it. Oh, but it's just so quiet. I mean, we're passing construction equipment here and they might be working, they might not. I would have no idea anyway. It's actually quicker than you might think. It seems like it gets up and goes pretty well. I wouldn't necessarily call it slow, but obviously it's not rushed. When you floor it, it's clearly, the acceleration experience is clearly dulled by the transmission, which is intending to provide the smoothest experience possible, and it succeeds in doing so. But the drawback is, of course, that it doesn't exactly have quick shifts. They're lazy, smooth shifts. There's no urgency to the power. You can put your foot down and get going and whatever, but it's not intended to be a fast car. People who own these have 10 other cars and they have a bunch of fast cars. The point of this car, though, is to just, you want something to just relax and have a comfortable experience. But mostly you're just so insulated. You're just incredibly insulated from anything going on in the world around you. Everyone else's world is drowned out. It just feels so quiet and so removed, as is the intent, and they succeed so well in doing that. And the impressive thing is they succeed so well in doing that even with a soft top. A lot of times, you know, that adds to some of the, you can hear a little bit more, it's not quite as quiet. Well, not in this car. It's just as insulated as a Phantom sedan that I've driven. Now, because this one has these aftermarket rims and sort of narrower tires, I imagine the ride quality isn't quite as good. You can hear a little bit of tire noise. I suspect the original wheels with wider sidewalls and stuff would be just even more comfortable and insulated. It's hard just not to feel like you're the king of the world when you're driving this thing, looking out over this massively long hood, and then at the very end of it you have the Spirit of Ecstasy, which you've learned your whole life is like the ultimate symbol of luxurious opulence. And the funny thing is, you get passed by people and whatever, and you just don't care. None of that stuff matters when you're driving this car. You just don't care about anything, because you just don't have to. You're already the king of the world. You don't have to go fast to prove your point. You don't have to change lanes. You don't have to be first anywhere. It doesn't matter when you're in this car. The thinking of like, oh, I should be first at this light, oh, I gotta change lanes, those thoughts no longer apply when you're in this vehicle. And so that's the Rolls-Royce Phantom Drophead Coupe. Yes, the new Rolls-Royce Dawn is a technically more expensive convertible, but the Dawn is based on the entry-level Rolls-Royce Ghost. The Phantom is the flagship of the model line. And do you really want to drive around in an entry-level Rolls-Royce? Of course not. You want this, and you want to drive it around and look down on all the plebeians who passed you by in their crappy little Bentleys and Mercedes. And now it's time to give this car a DougScore.
Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Drophead Coupe is fine, not beautiful, but very distinctive and interesting, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Acceleration 0 to 60 is 5.7 seconds, so it gets a 4 out of 10. Handling is okay, secure, fine, nothing great, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Fun factor is good. It's a lot of fun driving this thing around and playing the role of someone who is better than everyone else, though I suspect it'd be even more fun if you actually had the mansion and the watch collection to back it up. Anyway, it gets a 6 out of 10. Cool factor is strong. These are cool and special, and it gets a 7 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 28 out of 50. As for the daily categories and features, it's loaded with great tech for the last generation Phantom, but a lot of it is just that, last generation, and it gets only a 7 out of 10. Comfort is amazing, and it gets an easy 10 out of 10. Quality is decent, but it's starting to look a little dated inside, and who knows what this thing is like to service and own. It gets an 8 out of 10. Practicality is okay. It's got a big interior, a decent trunk, and 4 seats, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Finally, value. It's a bargain compared to the original price, but it's still massively expensive, and it has a long way to fall, and it gets a 5 out of 10 for a total daily score of 34 out of 50. Added up, and the DougScore is 62 out of 100, and here's how it compares to other high-end luxury cars I've tested. It falls behind most of them, largely because they're newer and a little better here and there, but even though it's 5 years old, the Phantom Drophead Coupe still has the luxury chops to play it close with the best.